So for each of you, how did you kind of navigate the spaces that you're in? Like, who were your role models? And maybe the answer is your gurus, right? That's one of the things that Indu you were just talking about. But maybe there's others. So I just want to open it up to all of you. What were some of the examples and role models that you looked up to when you went into these spaces? Again, not necessarily places where there are a lot of devout Hindus, but how did you kind of navigate that and look for examples?
I can start. I think definitely my guru was my biggest inspiration of how to go about things, but specifically in studying religious studies or working in the nonprofit space, I wouldn't say I had a specific role model. And I think now that, I've been more steeped in these spaces, there are people that I would look to and say, wow, they're really good, but they're really accomplished and I want to learn more from them. But, even studying religious studies, I remember I was speaking to a devout Hindu professor, of course, they will remain nameless, who said to me, if you want to, be a professor, don't say anything. Don't say anything that could be controversial until you're tenured. And then I started hearing at the highest levels, they said, don't say anything until you get to be a professor. And then in being a professor, there's this period called trying to become tenured. So then then professors were saying, well, don't say anything controversial until you've finished tenure. So PhD can take such a long time, then getting tenured can take such a long time. And so getting it, this advice from somebody that I respected, from a practicing Hindu professor, was very shocking to me. So I actually had a lot of, instead of having, role models in the practical everyday space, I had a lot of naysayers telling me, don't say anything, or my parents saying, don't study this. But I want to touch on briefly, because I think this is connected to what you were saying, this question in the Q&A about how can you switch to social good as a career? And I would say, just like you were mentioning part of, that point about have a plan. If you want to switch to a full-time career, that's definitely possible. There's also many things that you can get involved in, such as interfaith groups, where you can come and share information about Hinduism, advocate for Hindus. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, which I mentioned a few times, is voluntary. So they're volunteers that are recommended to be a part of this very important entity. So you could have your own career and then also be involved in these types of things. But how does that happen? Well, you have to put in the effort and build up your resume. And so if you're looking at changing your career or modifying your career to be more targeted towards social good, especially social good for Hindus, I think, and any kind of social good, you have to find those people that are already in those places, that have that position, that they are, working for the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or they do have certain positions, whether it's, being on the city council or, being a local politician, anything like that. Look at the resumes of people that are there now and start working on building up your resume. This can take years. But this is very practical, to look at the resumes of the people that are already in the positions that you want. First, identifying those positions is important, but then look at their resumes. All their information, of course, will be publicly available. You just have to search properly and then start building your resume. And that can take at least a few years. But over time, you'll be in a good position to help not only Hindus, but our greater American community. And so this is definitely possible if you want to switch your career or modify your career, or do more for social good, even outside of your career. All of that is definitely possible. Even if we're working in businesses or, we're working in stores, whatever our situation is in life, we can always do social good. So we just have to look for those opportunities, whether it's being your union rep or being a local politician or something even beyond that. We have to open ourselves up to those possibilities and then put in the work, and then of building our resumes to be that, and making those relationships, meeting the people that will be able to put us in those positions. So building our resumes, meeting the right people, that's what we can do to change our career or our extracurricular activities to be targeted more towards social good.
I would agree with Deepali that I don't think I had any particular role models. I was just really taking a risk. There was no one that I was looking at that I was modeling my life after. I was just going with Bhakti and surrender, total surrender. When I got to my doctoral program, my advisor, who's not Hindu, she considers herself to be a Buddhist, but it's very much that white Buddhism. But she told me, she said, grad school is when you can really take risks and say whatever you want and not worry. It's only when you get your first position that you have to start being political. And so I just took that because I didn't need too much incentive. I just took that and ran with it. And then I kind of couldn't get out of the habit of just speaking my mind. But in terms of role models, I would say, like, yeah, I have often, and I've talked to Uma about this, like I have often longed for that mentor who's at the next step that can help me. And I don't know of anyone. If you are out there and you're listening, please reach out to me. And the other thing I'll say is, and I am excited to talk about this. This is a huge part of the work we're doing at HUA. I am co-designing, or we are co-designing this really incredible professional doctoral program in Hindu studies that does exactly what we're talking about. It marries the Hindu perspective with all of these different disciplines, and really is sort of this incubator for field building, which is something that, Uma and I talk a lot about. Field building is, and maybe Uma, you can talk about this a bit more, because I think that's really the direction this conversation is kind of headed. But it's about, not only what does our next generation of Hindu American leaders of our institutions look like, but what does it mean to have Hindu presence and Hindu perspectives in all of our major institutions that impact public welfare, that impact social consciousness, that impact how everyone is thinking about how do we strive towards a more perfect union together, and how do Hindus show up for that, and what do we have to say to contribute to that, right? And so we are beginning to do it at an institutional level. I think that's really important for us to celebrate and support. That maybe 10 years from now, young Hindus will say, well, these are my role models, as opposed to there are not a lot that I can find. I think that's a really great sankalpa for us as a community, is to create a generation of role models so that in the future our children have lots of role models to look to.
So I'll name, like, my ultimate role model is my Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, both in terms of the deep internal development that I've been able to get as a leader, as how I make sense of the world around me, how our wisdom tradition, everything can help me make meaning. And so there's a continual, every time I'm immersed in Sangha, satsang with him, it is both my own development, but I'm always also pinging on, well, then what does this have to do with collective consciousness? What does this have to do with social change? Like, I feel like I'm perennially in that moment with him, in my relationship, in my dialogue with him. And I've also had the opportunity of seeing him in action, in negotiating peace, in sitting and talking with activists, because Gurudev is a very actively, like, socially actively engaged guru. That is also his flavor, is very much about relevance in the world and showing up as a leader, as a Hindu leader in the world too. And I've been so blessed to actually be able to be in some really beautiful dialogue spaces with him, where I've seen how he engages and kind of models how to enable people to open their minds, to negotiate conflict across seemingly impossible impasses. And what is that skill that takes? And where is it that he's quiet? Because there is not a readiness, there is not a ripeness that's there. So for me, so much of how I show up as a social change leader is so guided by the modeling that Gurudev has given me in that process. And also, I have found, because I've been more deeply embedded within Art of Living as well, a number of teachers and as well as sevaks within Art of Living who, and I would say like it's to not to put all of the pressure on perfection on any one of them, but there's a beautiful expression of a flavor of some sort of skill or some sort of way of moving about making change happen that I've been able to absorb and learn from over the years as well. And I think this is the opportunity of sort of Seva projects that might exist within any one of our spiritual organizations, is it's a way to kind of build the muscles. Like, how do you inspire people? How do you ignite people to be volunteers with you? How do you make sense of, okay, what's the challenge that we want to take on? What do we care about? What are we complaining about that therefore indicates we should probably take some responsibility for it? And so there can be a way in which, in that journey from kind of if in making a shift in a career, that we can actually use Seva sort of volunteering opportunities as well to start to give us an indication of, oh, wow, I really care about this thing. Like I know, Indu, for you with getting into education, some of it started with you mentoring kids while you were an economist and starting to see like, wow, there's something that's lighting up in me right now as a result. I'm going to speak on your behalf because, I'm allowed to because you're my sister. And so with that, I think, there's always room. There's always an opportunity to sort of take that other path. And, I think the other piece is, not striving, I think in seeking out mentors, to not put the perfection on any one person, that they're going to completely embody everything that you want to become. But instead, everyone can kind of offer gifts and perspectives that might help sharpen and shape your own mode. And, in a very practical sense, in Deepali, so I like the very practical way that you've laid it out in terms of resume and in terms of relationships. Just keep meeting people, like get outside the bubble of the people that you know already, the day-to-day routine, and, just meet tons and tons of people out in the world. And some people will be irritating and their analysis will be wrong. But that's great. Learn that and then go meet other people and, allow that relationship. I learn a lot by relationships and by seeing how other people do things. It helps me sharpen how I might want to do things and ask people their stories. People love to tell the stories of their own journeys. I mean, look at us. We're like hanging out on a Sunday for an hour and a half because people like telling the story, their own stories. So ask those stories of people that you admire. People love to mentor other people too, kind of at any stage. I've found that both in terms of people I've kind of asked to mentor me, but also when people ask if I can mentor them, it's kind of hard to say, no, I don't want to show up for you. Like it's a very beautiful kind of relationship that we can have. And so just be unabashed in asking people for that as well. It doesn't have to be a permanent relationship, but it can be for some period of time. Can I watch what you're doing? Can I ask you questions afterwards? And that can actually be a really great way to start to feel out what might be the right path for you. And especially if you're young. If you're 19 years old, like it's 100% expected. You probably shouldn't know exactly what you want to do. Like use that right time to just try a bunch of stuff before you really kind of find that focus as well.